It's another 12 days of Acemas, and this time we've got the naughty list. So, first of all, these are not necessarily cards that I hate. These are not necessarily cards that I think should be banned or errated, as that'll probably become obvious. And let's just assume that every card that got banned or errated is already on the naughty list. It's on the actual factual naughty list. So I didn't include those. I could have easily included uh, Pony Sunatori or something like that. But I decided to stick with cards, that aren't on the ban list. And these aren't, again, necessarily like super oppressive cards, though. You'll see that that can get you on the naughty list. But these are mostly just cards, that put a bad taste in your mouth. They might not be like too good competitively, but they are just cards you don't want to see at your locals. And number one on that list has to be Filled with Doubt. Filled with Doubt is incredibly low cost. It's 2 difficulty, comes from the hand. Now, the deck building cost of playing actions means not everyone spams it. Lower health characters tend to not be able to afford more copies of this card, right? I find that, it's typically DR decks that make the most use of this. I think it's the Hanji Zoe decks that play like 4 of it. So, it's not completely free, but it is very, very low cost, and the fact that it comes from hand makes it incredibly powerful. I talked about how Nonagon is like the fair version of this card. This is, a less interactable version of it. It's got the infinity symbol, so it can be in every deck. And if you're not playing with open deck lists, again, like casual environment, you probably just have to guess. You just have to worry. It could be in literally every deck in every hand, so it's pretty annoying that it can be that widespread. I mean, even in open deck lists, if your opponent has 4, you kind of assume they have one and then they don't, and it gets pretty annoying. But you see it on basically every deck list. It's almost the most staple card, but I shouldn't say it's on almost every deck list, but you do see it quite a bit. There's cards that you see a little bit more often, like Moment of Normalcy, but infinity symbol means you see this way more than you want to. It hurts casual playing rogue strategies disproportionately. This one's probably a little bit of a hot take, but I really feel like, really strong meta decks can depend reliably on their stats. And typically, when it's a rogue strategy, you really need specific cards. And why would you need specific cards? Because they have different text, right? It's rogue strategies. They might care about keywords or something like that doesn't necessarily get hit by sealed. But, for the most part, a rogue strategy or a non-meta deck is typically playing something like Suzuki Flurry because of the text on Suzuki Flurry, not because it's a 5 difficulty, 5 high for 5. Really good decks, meta decks can tend to cover every, element of their attack. So even if you seal it, they're probably putting pretty good stats on it. But rogue strategies are the ones that are like, I need to play this specific combination of cards, and the text on those cards is pretty much always going to matter. And same thing with casual play, where it starts like this really unfun rule zero discussion of, what counts as casual, and is it okay in a good deck or a bad deck, or is it only this character that's not allowed to do it? And it gets pretty tough when your casuals have to come up with like a fake ban list or something. Like, that's just, it's not worth it. You can't really do that most of the time anyways, and so people are just going to be playing Filled Without, have varying levels of casualness. I don't know. I want my cards to like do stuff more often than Filled Without allows. People who play super hard control at locals typically aren't anyone's favorite person at locals, and this kind of falls in that category. Mikasa is me. That is my face every time my opponent plays Filled Without. That's just, tears in my eyes. Absolutely. It's not doubt. Like, when I see this this comic panel, it's not doubt. It's overwhelming depression. And that is just my face every single time my opponent plays Filled Without against me and I don't get to activate the abilities on my card. And it reminds me of cards like Taguro Brothers and Bang. These are other like sort of silver bullet, really powerful effect cards that, while they did have interactability, in fact, I would argue because of the widespreadness and the power levels of the formats. Tagoro Brothers and Bang had more cards that interact with them in general or in easier ways than Filled Without does. Filled Without, of course, is weaker than those two cards. For the most part, it might actually be on, I don't know, seal any card in stage versus attacks. Like Bang can't seal attacks, but also has an offensive mode. Yeah, okay. So Filled Without is weaker than these two cards, but it reminds me a lot of them. A big thing about Tagoro Brothers and Bang was they were actions that would leave the card pool. So back before we had gotten rid of symbol chaining, you could play Tagoro Brothers and Bang in almost any deck as long as it had one of those symbols. And that was a big reason why people hated those cards too, is because of how widespread they were. So because of the infinity symbol, it's kind of the same issue here, where pretty much any deck can play this card. Any good deck just gets better, when it's relevant for the matchup. It's not a bad choice to side a couple of these. Like I said, it hurts. It hurts like the Falling Titans rogue decks out there. I think the Allura Falling Titans deck would probably be a lot happier without a card like this in the format. So the silver bullet nature of it, that's something that Bang kind of did. Bang was banned from retro at one point when we were trying to discover which characters could be problems. And to do that, you needed to see which characters could overperform. And Bang would disproportionately, kind of hide those characters. You could bang a broken character and keep them down basically and eliminate them from tournaments. So it has the same sort of vibe. So Filled Without is number one on my naughty list for sure this year. But on the naughty list is also Military Airship. Military Airship. It caused hysteria during reveal season, leading to a rule change. The change around the unique rule. People speculated for months and months, or maybe it was weeks and weeks, but it felt like forever that people were like, oh my God, you could do this infinite, and you could do that infinite, and this infinite, do that infinite, and none of those infinites really came to fruition. And then eventually we got like the unique rule change and stuff like that. So it was just really annoying. Like I think a lot of the negative feelings about Airship is part of that preview season, but that is the reality of it. And I'm really, really not fond of that era of UVS. Freeze for cost is unintuitive. I think people are kind of over it now for the most part, but newer players that start to play the game and start to play with this card kind of will run into this anyways. I still see players who get like the spark in their eye and they're like, oh, Dangerous Gambit, Military Airship. Even before they realize that that's like pseudo infinite if it worked. They just they get it in their head that they can ready this and do it again. And freezing a card that's already frozen, that's something I didn't even know for sure. I was like, well, why not? Sealing a card that's already sealed, that's also something that even as a veteran player in my head, I was like, well, it's not obvious really what the rule is on that. So yeah, I think that freeze for cost is part of what was really annoying early on and like causes casual kerfluffles. Infinity symbol, so it splashes a one of in basically every deck. So if there's a card that's more played than Filled Without, or almost as much as Moment of Normalcy, it's probably this guy, maybe more than Moment of Normalcy actually. But the ability to touch cards and stage as an all-time high. So it you gotta put targets for your opponent's interaction just to protect other cards. But Military Airship definitely gets splashed into pretty much every deck almost, and that's pretty boring. And then the availability issue. So this is another thing where it's almost like it's not really Military Airship's fault. I don't want to put it on the naughty list just for being really, really powerful, but the other stuff around it, the promo availability issues for it was pretty annoying, pretty stinky. This card just has so much like negative aura around it. I don't like seeing my opponent play it. I don't even really like playing it. It seems like it's, one of those assets that everyone has to play a little bit of asset hate for, and it almost always gets interacted with, but you like have to do it, and it causes games to play out very samey. A lot of times it can also just be like the writing on the wall. This is one of those cards that can show your opponent like you're dead before you're dead, because the airship is available. So all in all, I'm just not a fan of this card. I think a big part of it is my infinity symbol stigma. I think it's not really good for the game. I don't think it really is interesting that often. Like, it's very, very hard to make an infinity card interesting to me. And these first two are some of the most generically planned, useful infinities. Like, that's just, I guess, I guess it's good for infinity symbol cards is that they're bland and not tied to something that would be a symbol's identity. But yeah, very, very bland, very boring stuff to start things off. It's also going to get pristine swordplay banned. I'm pretty sure with the new unique rule change, sacrificing assets are how you're gonna abuse this. And I almost guarantee that there's gonna be, some equipment heist airship, deck that plays pristine. And the thing that's gonna be really annoying about the loop is that pristine is the one that sacrifices it, and they're instead of killing airship, they're gonna kill the thing that sacrifices airship that makes the loop possible. And pristine sword plays kind of cool, and sacrificing an asset for damage and stuff like that should be totally fine. But now it's going to be the enabler of the loop, and it's going to die for the sins of other cards. You can mark my words. True 100% Unleashed. This is a naughty card. Now, this is a card I actually like for a couple reasons. True 100% Unleashed has like a fake deadlock kind of a thing. It's like a card that, kills people in deadlock, but isn't only usable in deadlock. And I think that's a way, way better use of things. But it's also fake desperation, which is something I hate too. So, desperation and deadlock are like two of the most hard to design around, tumultuous sort of concepts. They're not really keywords. I guess desperation is also a keyword, but anyways, they're two of the harder concepts and rules to kind of design around, in my opinion. So it's it's towing a fine line here with True 100. I do like blocking though, and I think that like the automatic block is kind of neat. So I like this card, but it makes a naughty list for a couple reasons. It was a part of two gross strategies throughout the year, two strategies, two decks that you almost sit down and like you're groaning before you even play a single game against them most of the time. And they were two decks that you got very, very tired of playing against very quickly for two totally different reasons. King Ghidorah won a regional this year playing 4 of this card, and we all know King Ghidorah players deserve less, even though I like most of them in person. I'm a big fan of the actual King Ghidorah players that I know and hang out with. But they deserve less as far as UVS goes. Um, the Nick Reagan abusers, Nick Reagan abuses the hell out of this card. Like, the 60 card version of this deck, the 60 card Nick Reagan deck that just tries to hit true 100s off true 100s is so silly and annoying. And people should probably be playing at regionals. It seems like an easy top 8 with a chance to go all the way. It's one of the few strategies that can beat over Deku early in a game, especially the turn before he transforms. If they don't transform immediately turn 2, and even if they do, having some committed resources, stuff like that, you bait out the flash, etc. So Nick Reagan being able to stable this onto a 4 diff is annoying. Being able to double up on it's annoying. Just gross at every stage of the game for a deck like that. And the response has an awkward timing, which causes non-bows. I talked about how I actually kind of like having a free block trick. I like the blocks up and stuff like that. But because it removes from the game before you've actually blocked the attack, not only is it confusing to go, okay, yeah, that does work, I guess, but it causes it to non-bow with things that would give it breaker or, certain timings with that need like a block to exist. So it gets kind of weird, and it also makes it a little hard to interact with. It responds to the check being made. So even if you could like seal a rival's block, it's too late. It responded before the attack was blocked. So very, very weird stuff. Overall, I don't, like I said, these aren't cards I hate. This was a naughty card this year. It was a part of some naughty things going on. And I'm excited to see it, get played in other places than Nick Reagan and King Ghidorah. And then last up, we got Dual Needle Lunge. Dual Needle Lunge has been a menace for the entirety of its legality. It's not the most powerful or most ridiculous card, but it's kind of tired of seeing it. I think it's on the naughty list because it goes in what feels like everything. I really struggle to find death, life, water decks that aren't like beholden to some different keyword or like some really like obvious, strategy. I had a Titans Hanji Zoe Four Eyes Life deck that really liked this card when I added it in. It clears progressive. Losing health is often a good thing. I mean, it just feels like it goes in everything, and it goes in everything that is corny. Death, life, and water decks are corny as hell. They're some of the corniest symbols. They are some of the corniest things when combined. You know, life, water, like reversal stuff from the past might have me jaded and biased, but even to this day, life water characters are some of the cheatiest, progressive ignoring, symbol stealing. Water is like a symbol biter, like steals other symbols' identities. Life, people hate life gain. Life gain strategies like Ymir was, beholden to this card because of losing health being a benefit. And then death strategies, this has nothing to do with the death. I guess losing health. No, that's like an evil thing. This has nothing to do with the death symbol. I don't really get it. It's a symbol pie break for both chaos and the air symbol. Clearing the card pool is the air thing, and then ramping the momentum is the chaos thing. So this card has just absolutely no real identity. And it as an air enjoyer, it kind of bothers me. I'll be honest. And then it's annoying to wait to see if your opponent is gonna mill me to, just randomly, like with no information, no rhyme or reason. They've got absolutely no information to make this decision like 90% of the time. And then if you are a deck that is stacking the top of your deck and cares about the top of your discard pile and stuff, you might deserve this. But at the same time, it's pretty annoying that this card that was printed like so many years ago that still gets seen today and you're gonna get like the random pairing where they dunk on your strategy. It's not good. It's just never fun to see this across the aisle, and it seems like it gets played a whole lot. Whoops, sorry. We got one more. I guess you've seen what the last one is. We've got one more card on the naughty list here, and that's Wingnut Sabotage. Wingnut Sabotage is a frustrating one. It doesn't let me play the game. When my opponent plays this card, I don't get to play the game. I'm not a fan of that. Just make it a flash attack. It would be so much more fair if it was a flash attack. I mean, the fact that it lets your rival do a whole enhanced step is pretty crazy overall. And it's not even good enough to kill me. That's the most insulting part. All these other cards on this list, Dual Needle Lunge has EX2, so it becomes a kill condition sometimes. It's a loopable card in Mikasa. But this card usually isn't even good enough to kill me. People are playing as a 4/4. It doesn't even have the decency to get the game over with. The art's pretty lame. I kept looking at this card. I'm like, oh, it randomly dunks on assets. It didn't make sense to me. But the card's called Sabotage. It's sabotaging your technology, right? So like the disconnect between it's just Wingnut's face. Like the art's just lame. It doesn't look that good in person. And then this is the card that makes me just say, all right, bro, you got it. You don't want to play. You don't want me to play. I won't play. You got it. If you play this card against me at locals, I'm probably just gonna like take a lunch break, go find something else to do. I'm just I'm just like, all right. Same thing with like the last video where it's like I don't want to read all that. Like I'm just call me when I can play the game again. Do all your enhancements. I'm gonna go shop for dice or something at my locals. Like I'm not here for it. It's so funny. I can't remember who it was. Someone played Wingnut Sabotage against me in Atlanta, and it I think it was a Ryu deck. I don't remember, but someone played it against me in tournament in Atlanta, and I almost, as by instinct, started scooping up my cards because that's just how not here for this I am. So, Wingnut Sabotage definitely not overpowered yet. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, but definitely not a fun one to play against. But let me know down in the comments below, what were your personal gripes for 2025? Which cards do you hate seeing? Which ones made your naughty list? Again, these aren't ban-worthy cards, not necessarily cards I want to see get out of the format, but they are cards I just wish you wouldn't bring to locals.